Thanks for joining us on the Week in Review. I'm Paris Schutz. Chicago's public school board set to become hybrid with elected and appointed members. State lawmakers approve a hybrid Chicago Public School Board with 10 members elected and 11 appointed by the mayor. The bill now awaits the governor's signature.
The economics are going to be something that we are going to have to go back and forth about with all the public leaders in this space.
Meanwhile, the Chicago Teachers Union gears up for a new collective bargaining contract, seeking as much as 9% yearly raises as the school system faces a fiscal cliff.
Clayton Harris, politics as usual. Evidence showed he was innocent, but Burke ignored it and prosecuted him anyway.
Allegations fly in the closely contested Cook County State's Attorney Democratic primary between Clayton Harris and Judge Eileen O'Neill Burke. President Biden delivers forceful campaign-style State of the Union, calling out Republicans for blocking a border deal. This as the U.S. Supreme Court restores indicted former President Trump to the ballot in Illinois and all other states. And in sports, the Bears reportedly about to unveil big proposal for Lakefront Dome Stadium and big asks for public financing. And now to our Week in Review panel. Joining us are Tina Sfondelis of the Chicago Sun-Times, Nell Saltzman of the Chicago Tribune, Sarah Karp of WBEZ, and Adie Quigg of the Chicago Tribune as well. In honor of International Women's Day, we have an all-women panel. I'm grateful for all of you to be here. And Sarah Karp, I wish I had a whiteboard so we could explain this elected school board bill.
Yeah, it's a headache.
In the simplest way possible, explain to our viewers how this hybrid school board is going to work if the governor signs the bill.
So basically, you're going to have the city split into 10 districts for 2025, the election that's going to be for 2025. And everybody can vote in their district, right? And there'll be 11 people who will be appointed by the mayor, including the president of the school board. But the 10 other people that he appoints have to be from the side of the district that the person who is elected isn't from. So eventually...
Okay, so there's 10 districts, and the person elected's got to be on one side of the district, and the appointed person has to be on the other side of the district, because by 2026, it'll be all elected districts.
And those people who are the 10 of this year can run for re-election if they want to. And you can run for re-election in 2026.
And this is kind of how City Council had kind of designed the bill, and it had to go to the state. But initially, State Senate President Don Harmon said, well, why don't we just do all elected right now? CTU, which has been clamoring for elected school board forever, said, nah, let's wait.
Yeah.
Anything to do with having their guy in the fifth floor getting to appoint all those members?
Well, last year he came up with a lot of different proposals on this. Sarah and I both covered it. It was very complicated, nested districts, all types of different rules, complicated things. And then all of a sudden he got the letter from Mayor Brandon Johnson, and he allowed it to go forward. So he did want that. He said, I want your input. I want to know what you want to do, Mayor. This is affecting your city. And you're having lawmakers from all across the state who are voting on this thing. So he wanted the city's mayor to tell us what he wanted to do.
Yeah, and let's be real, he also wanted to sort of force the mayor to say, I don't want a fully elected school board. I mean, that was part of, I think, the calculation.
A jacket-wearing calculation.
Right, right.
And if you get to a point, the majority of members still, why wouldn't you want that power? But again, it's only going to be for 2 years.
It's if you saw the debate, it was so lukewarm. Everyone's like, I guess we're doing this. Like, it wasn't any sort of like, this is wonderful, this is great for democracy. It was very much like, this is not perfect, so let's get this started and let's see how it goes.
Democracy can be very messy, and I think that this is going to really illustrate that. So how do they do in terms of equity and demographics of these districts?
Well, there are a lot of folks brought this up from the start. There were concerns about would these districts adequately represent the students that are predominantly in CPS. I'm going to defer to the experts on how well that actually worked out, but not everyone was happy going into this, and I doubt everyone was happy coming out.
Right, it was better than the initial map, which would have had way more people in majority white districts than the city. So that was the big issue, is that, you know, the school district is about 85% Black or Latino, right. And how do you then have a city that's, you know, really sort of like a 35%, how do you then like make a school board that reflects the student body as opposed to the
right.
city?
Nell Saltzman, how do you expect these races to go? Do you expect that every single candidate here would have some CTU backing?
I would also defer to the experts on this situation. But yeah, I think CTU backing is likely. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah. Well, is there some thought to the? First of all, when are these races going to happen in the next?
It's November.
This November. So they have to get the candidates
within the next 3 weeks. I believe that's when they could start.
1,000 signatures apiece.
Are there candidates in every district so far?
I finally heard from somebody today called me and said I'm running. So that's number one. That's number one that I've heard. So we're starting to hear rumblings, but it's just, the CTU will have backers, but they're also the charter schools are going to have backers. Stand for Children, which we hadn't heard from in a long time. I think they're gearing up because I've started getting press releases from them. That's like sort of the new Democrat group that was pretty active about 10 years ago. So there's going to be money because there's money at the school district, and it's going to be coming in. I would be surprised if the CTU was the only people who had people in the game.
Well, the other thing is like how much money CTU has spent on previous elections, helping Mayor Brandon Johnson win, but also the candidates they're supporting this round. It takes a lot of money to support as many candidates as they are supporting, but what they do have is manpower to lend, which I don't think. To an extent, charter schools do have that network, but not the same way as CTU does.
And that's kind of what we learned in this election. Ballas had more money, but CTU had the power of the turnout. Speaking of money, it looks like that some outlets have gotten leaked copies of the CTU's contract proposal. Their collective bargaining agreement is up, and it looks like they're asking for 9% base pay raises every year. Where's CPS going to find the money to fund that?
Well, this is the starting point, right? So they're shooting for the moon. They won't get it. They'll be forced to compromise. I mean, they have a lot of other asks. I think they said that they have hundreds of proposals, which I guess they always do. And, some are very small, like we want to make sure that, we have planning time, or we have 5 minutes here, 10 minutes here. But then there's a lot of big proposals. I mean, a librarian in every school, that's going to be a big push. More money for sports, more money for arts. And a lot of other little things that are going to cost a lot of money.
Let's not forget they're facing a $700 million fiscal cliff.
Right. And so one thing that was the most interesting, perhaps, that Stacey Davis Gates said when she spoke at the City Club this week was she's starting to talk about a phased-in approach and a long contract. So what does that say to me is that what we're talking about is maybe you get a 5-year contract and you put a lot of the stuff later and hope that that the school district can find money. It's also a way to tie the hands of this newly elected school board, tie the hands if, maybe Johnson is not mayor, in a couple of years, but we don't, I'm not saying he's not going to be, but just in case. So I think that that's a very interesting strategy.
All right, let's get back to some city news. The Bring Chicago Home ballot referendum that would ask voters whether a new tax on higher real estate sales should bring in $100 million to fund homeless programs. So it's officially back on the ballot now.
It's back on the ballot. I mean, it was always on there, kind of, but just in this dispute, the appellate court ruled that it can officially be on the ballot. They did not remove it, is what I'm saying. Like people were.
So it's going to be on there, but now it's going to count.
There. But that's I think that's so confusing for voters. I think it may have impacted this referendum because if you are unsure, not trusting what you're reading, and you see this on this ballot, I think it's pretty confusing for a voter to think that it wouldn't count.
So basically, the appellate court sided with the Chicago Board of Elections, who claim, look, we don't have anything to do with policy. We're not the proper defendant on this case. Why did the plaintiffs, which represent real estate interests, why would they sue the Chicago Board of Elections? It was the city of Chicago that came up with
the appellate court didn't even address that. The appellate court just said, hey, you can't sue at this point in the legislative process. We need to let all these steps go through. It is not the court's jurisdiction to decide at this point in the legislative process. We're on step one. There's going to be this public vote, and then there will be council. If it does pass, council has to vote on it. I think there is a possibility. I spoke with some election attorneys this week who said, I think these real estate interests would have a good chance if after passage they came back and said, this was not a properly formed question, we should toss it out.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, it seems like both, like, say the thing doesn't pass. Couldn't the Bring Chicago Home referendum people say, hey, this was so confusing, people thought it didn't count, this result should be thrown out, we should have another try at this?
Well, and if it does fail, I think they could try again. I think the pro Bring Chicago Home folks could try again in November, which is a question I've been asking over and over. Like, if this doesn't work out, are you going to try again in November?
These things are not very popular. Think about the progressive income tax ballot referendum. Like, it's scary. People are scared of these types of changes, or not really knowing. Some people say that they're not quite sure that the language shows that the $100 million would actually go towards that. Maybe there would be some squishy other things that it can go towards.
Well, the mayor at this point has not even said how this was going to be spent. He said, well, we'll come up with a plan to do that later. We'll start with the number. Right. So folks might be worried about that.
And there's still some federal funds that I think that they didn't use for this, for homelessness. Right. So there's a lot of questions here.
Right.
The other question is, like, what's turnout going to be? I mean, you have a couple contested races, but the presidential race on the Democratic side is not that contested. So what do you think that means for turnout in the city of Chicago?
Well, maybe people will care about the state's attorney. I don't know.
That's a very important race, so we are going to talk about that.
It is an important race. So, I mean, maybe people will turn out for that, but I do think that most people, since the president is so decided, maybe people will turn out to say that they be uncommitted in the presidential race, to say, to have a protest vote, but I really don't think that many people are going to turn out. There's an early voting place at my YMCA, and I have not seen anybody walk around.
I mean, I think the total early voting numbers across the city are only a few thousand at this point, which is really small.
Yeah, a couple 10,000. And because early voting has started so early and people have gotten used to it, I have no idea if the numbers we're seeing now will kind of stay the same, or we'll actually see, I don't think we're going to see voting day surges anymore.
No, I don't think we're going to see long lines on voting day. No. This portends to be a very low turnout election. Now, Nell, I want to turn to a story you reported on about the migrants. You've been following the migrant crisis pretty closely, and a shortage now of hygiene products and essential supplies at migrant shelters. They're complaining about how bad is this shortage?
Yeah, it seems like Favorite Staffing, which is the largest contractor to handle the burgeoning migrant crisis, they submit requests to FEMA and IEMA. And so it seems like actually the supply shortage is handled by Favorite Staffing. So the supply shortage itself, there's questions about whether or not there's enough hygiene products and toilet paper. Diapers, exactly. But what we ran into this week and what we reported on this week is the rationing of supplies. So volunteers who are dropping off donations outside shelters because they've heard of these shortages of really essential items, right? Like we said, pads and diapers. They're coming and bringing supplies to shelters, and then migrants are being told that they can't get supplies from Favorite Staffing officials inside shelters, and they have to go up to staffers and ask for toilet paper and ask for pads when a woman's on her period.
So why are outside groups that want to donate this stuff, why is it so hard to get that stuff to the migrants? Why is Favorite Staffing, as I understand, Favorite Staffing is kind of discouraging that?
Right, exactly. It's kind of a long history with Favorite Staffing. Last summer, some volunteers were outside just giving food to migrants, and they were arrested by some police, or at least they were not arrested, but they were harassed by police, told to leave the premises.
I just wonder why, if there's a shortage and folks want to help and give supplies, why it wouldn't be welcomed.
I have a friend who went to Costco and bought a bunch of diapers last week and brought them, and hopefully they got them, but maybe not.
Seems like Favorite Staffing wants to they have this $40 million contract with the city that they recently renewed. They are running the Pilsen migrant shelter, which we know has had just nothing but problems, nothing but bad conditions, disease outbreaks, and now measles.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Today we were there talking to some women outside, who were saying that they were told not to go to school, but they'd gotten, and this is right in your expertise, they'd gotten a call, from CPS, right? Your standard, why aren't my kids at school call? And so they're going, even though they weren't vaccinated, they were going back to the elementary school because they wanted to tell and assure teachers the reason was because of the measles outbreak. So it's, So
you wonder, there's kids going to public, you wonder if it could spread in public schools, but why is the shelter even still open given all the trouble that has been documented over and over, including the 5-year-old boy dying.
It's one of the largest ones in the system, right? So they've already taken how many shelters offline, and taking that one offline would open up the possibility of
or maybe moving some of these folks to the shelters that have gone offline.
Right.
By the way, speaking of going offline, March 16th, I believe, is the cutoff day, where this is the 60-day eviction notice. Mayor Johnson has sort of extended this deadline for migrants. Do you think he's going to do it again, or for real this time you might see migrants being evicted if they've been there for 60 days or long?
Right, that's a good question. I think that Mayor Johnson, is looking at a deficit of funds, and so that's sort of why I haven't gotten an answer from city and state officials about why shelters are closing. But it certainly seems, and from our reporting, Brandon Johnson's spending $1.5 million a day on the migrant crisis, right? So that's a lot of money, and so I think he's extended it 2 times for, citing weather, not wanting to put people out on the street. But it's at this point, it's where the rubber meets the road, and do we have the resources to keep shelters open?
Well, the state says, well, this is still happening, so they need to figure it out. And there was that agreement with Cook County Board Preckwinkle, the board president, Tony Preckwinkle, and the governor to give $70 million or so each, and the mayor has not done that. So there are some people arguing that this is still, it's not over. It's time to find the funds for that, to continue to fund this.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, where is the city on that meeting? Governor Pritzker in his budget address basically said, we're ponying up. The agreement was Cook County was going to pony up, the city's going to pony up, but Mayor Johnson's deferred on that so far.
Well, if you think about what has happened in the past is when they didn't have enough money, the state saves them. And Pritzker does not want the city to look bad on DNC year in a couple of months. So they are always going to save the city. So I think they are kind of using that tactic of they know they're going to be saved, but they're being a little shamed, please give money to this.
And the governor keeps going out publicly and kind of calling out the mayor's management of this, which was kind of extraordinary.
I do think there's discussions ongoing about trying to get that money from the city. I don't think it's completely over.
Do we have any sense, I just have a question, do we have any sense of how many migrants are actually getting housing? Like, is that process going any better than we've heard of in the past?
Yeah, it's going because the state has really made an effort. They've committed a lot of money through rental assistance, so people are moving out of the shelters. They're predominantly moving to the south and west sides, though, and that raises concerns for some people, those that are living in the community, and advocates who say maybe migrants might not speak the language, they might have long commutes to school, STLS, as protections of homeless migrant students. So there's a lot of concern for that, but it is true, it's happening a lot. A lot of migrants are leaving. Shelters moving.
And that's why many of them have been taken offline. All right, so the state's attorney's race was brought up before AD. So tell us about the 2 Democratic candidates, Clayton Harris, Eileen O'Neill Burke.
There's a lot to tell, and the battle right now is kind of over who is more progressive and who is a fake progressive. Both are trying to kind of assume the mantle of the more progressive candidate. Eileen O'Neill Burke, 30 years in the courtroom. She started off as a prosecutor, moved on to become a defense attorney, then a judge, then went up to the appellate court, retired from the appellate court to run for this office. She's really running on her experience, her know-how of the court system, and kind of being tougher on crime than current state's attorney Kim Foxx, who Clayton Harris III also started out as an assistant state's attorney in the 90s, moved on to essentially government affairs at the city and state. He ran the Illinois Port District, also served as a lobbyist for a couple companies, including Lyft, and throughout has taught public policy on policing at the University of Chicago. It's gone negative, essentially, in the past 2 weeks in a really intense way. And despite Sarah's hopes, there are a lot of people who don't know about this race. We had some recent polling where it was essentially evenly split between the candidates, and like 40+% of people not knowing either of them.
It seems like a toss-up, and it's just such an important office. I mean, this is 6 million people in Cook County. The
second largest prosecutorial office in the country.
In the country, so a very important office, and it's been met with controversy under Kim Foxx. But again, you see Judge Burke. Clayton Harris has tried to call out the fact that she's getting she's outraising him. She's getting money from Republican donors like the COO, I believe, of Citadel.
Gerald Beeson, yeah.
Gerald Beeson.
Which is where they staged a press conference right outside of Citadel on Monday with Preckwinkle and others talking about those contributions. I mean, you can argue some business leaders in Chicago are Republicans, so it's not a huge surprise that they would be supporting someone in the race. But, they believe that the Clayton side believes that shows that he is, that she is not as progressive as Clayton.
And I interviewed both of them this week. First story I'm going to do next week, but she basically said, well, folks want safer cities. That doesn't know a political party. They want a safe downtown. They want the stores to stop. And one thing that they do differ on, we know, is how they're going to prosecute retail theft.
Yes, that's been like one of the most defining issues of this race, despite it being a relatively small role in like the grand mandate of the office. So Clayton Harris said he's going to keep Kim Foxx's policy in place, which was not to prosecute theft if the goods being stolen are less than $300. He's going to keep that threshold in place. The state threshold is state threshold is $300.
300, I mean,
yes.
Yeah. Fox has said $1,000 is the cutoff that we're going to use.
For a felony. Otherwise, it'll be a misdemeanor. And Clayton has said, I will prosecute this if it involves a break-in or if it involves violence as a felony. This is a big split, and I think part of the reason the business community is really behind Justice Burke is because she says, I'm going to follow the state law. It is not my role to not follow the state law. I will exercise discretion if it's a first-time offense, but I'm going to stick to that $300 threshold because you could really clear out a lot from a business under $300, and it lends to this feeling of unsafeness, not being safe in downtown.
Or lack of accountability and folks maybe
reoffending.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the State of the Union. Tina Sfondelis, very vigorous campaign-style speech last night from President Biden. Does he put to rest these worries that maybe he's losing a step or two or three, and he's still got that vigor?
I think so. I think people described it as fiery, that he got through with a lot of his main points. You can see Speaker Johnson behind him kind of nodding sometimes because he said really obvious things like Ukraine needs to be supported, IVF should be protected. It's things that a lot of Republicans agree with. So he kind of went into this avenue of like public opinion. This is what the public wants, and I'm going to help to get it. So it was kind of hard to find something to go against him.
Including border security, which there's conservative Senator Langford from Oklahoma who pretty much wrote that border security bill that Biden says, hey, go and pass this. Send it to me. And we know that President Trump reportedly called, House members and Senate Republicans, don't pass it. Right. Let's keep the chaos at the border because that's a political victory for Biden if he passes it.
And the House disarray is good for Democrats, and I think he was trying to highlight all those problems ahead of an election. We had Super Tuesday, but we got a couple more primary races.
I wonder how angry Trump or some of the conservative Republicans are. That camera shot that got Langford basically. Do you think he knew he was on camera? Or were you going, this is true, this is true?
I think everyone needs to be prepared to be on camera, and we saw a lot yesterday. We saw a lot of nods, we saw a lot of yeses, we saw Marjorie Taylor Greene, lots of reactions.
Yeah.
Nell, did you tune in? What do you think about that? And then the response afterward.
Right, the response afterward. I mean, I think people, at least for my area of expertise, immigration, they commented on his noting of the word illegal. He talked a lot about immigration, right, and that was like really interesting for me to think about where that stands in the House. And where that stands in the Senate, and how politicized everything has been. There's so much noise around politics for immigration right now.
Always.
At this moment, particularly with Trump and his rhetoric, and also, just recent events in Chicago and nationally.
Immigration has turned into the ultimate political wedge issue that it seems, especially Republicans, want to have on the ballot every 2 years or so.
And they've pushed Biden to be sort
more
of
conservative,
way more conservative, and what he's trying to do, what he's talking about doing. I mean, if you're progressive on immigration, I don't know that you really support what Biden, increased, officers, a crackdown. I mean, they've really got him in that stance, and I don't know that would be good for the people who are here, who were just, welcoming.
Right. And I think it also ties into just how divided the base of both Biden and Trump are, right, with Gaza and with Israel and the situation with immigration.
Certainly going to divide the Democratic Party, the issue of Gaza and Israel.
Yeah, and looking at the DNC in Chicago and how that will affect both of their...
both candidates are going to have weaknesses within their own party. 80 quick, we only have 15 seconds left, but are there actually going to be plans unveiled for a Bears domed lakefront stadium at some point?
Nothing is out of the question when it comes to what teams want for stadiums. Nothing out. I think we're going to see a lot of ideas. I don't know how many of them stick because we have state legislature and a governor not wild on stadium subsidies.
Apparently, the House Speaker Chris Welch saw actual Bears plans.
I believe so, but it doesn't mean it's going anywhere. And the governor has said he does not want to deal with public subsidies. You just saw in Virginia, they shot that down. They took it out of their state budget. It's not very popular, especially in an election year, I think, to include such things.
And now we have two multi-billion-dollar sports organizations looking for new stadiums and public subsidies. So doubly unpopular, but certainly fun to cover. We are out of time, so our thanks to Tina Sfondelis, Nell Saltzman, Sarah Karp, and A.D. Quigg. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Polk Brothers Foundation. Additional support is provided by
And that's our show for this Friday night. Don't forget you can get Chicago Tonight and the Week in Review streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. And be sure to join us on Monday evening for WTTW News, A Safer City. And that's where we'll devote the entire program to issues of public and community safety. And now for the Week in Review, I'm Para Schutz. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to leap forward this weekend. Enjoy that lost hour sleep and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Still, so lawmakers might not be in favor of this, but are there like renderings and drawings out there or something?
I think the developers have lots of plans and pictures and pretty things to show people.
Yeah.
It just hasn't gone anywhere.
Just like
and
Reinsdorf
also,
did.
in the past, wouldn't this all be behind the scenes if it was actually happening? The fact that they're actually showing everything.
Yeah, I think they want to
me-
get people excited by
Yes.
how cool the renderings look and
Yes.
garner a lot of public support for
And
it
we are
from
a
fans.
sports city, so
And we're a
people
sports
are
city. We don't want to
excited
lose.
see this.
Like the risk of losing too is scary to people, and the excitement of getting.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud to recognize its 18 attorneys selected for the 2024 Super Lawyers List.